Hey, everybody. I'm Chris Metzler, one of the programmers here at SF Indie Fest. We're celebrating 24 years of bringing some of the most kind of independent, eclectic, and weird films from around the planet to here in the Bay Area. Um, so, um, obviously, we're living in a little bit of a topsy-turvy world here with the pandemic, but we're lucky enough still to have filmmakers like director Eddie Martin here to join us. Eddie is the filmmaker behind We Were Once Kids, which is our co-closing night film here at SF Indie Fest. So thanks again for being here, Eddie.
No problem. Thanks for having us, Chris. It's kind of exciting to be part of the festival and obviously an honor to be one of the co-films on closing night.
Yeah, most definitely. Aside of just being a terrific film, I kind of bring, as we kind of near our 25th anniversary of the festival, it kind of brings independent filmmaking full circle, with exploring some of the behind the scenes and kind of the stories behind kids. And so maybe a good place to kind of start is that, for many, kids is kind of one of these kind of independent film defining marks of cinema, the 1990s. And there was just so much hubbubaloo about the film at the time, and particularly how the film was cast and made. How did you kind of decide to kind of go down this rabbit hole to tell this story and kind of create, share this kind of alternative narrative to some of the kind of things that we're more familiar with?
Yeah, well, I mean, I was just really fortunate in a way, I guess, in that a project I did earlier, I had made a connection and a friend, an artist from Los Angeles called Danny Minnick, and he introduced me to a friend of his, Hamilton Harris, who was wanting to tell his story. So really, it was just via an introduction that I was connected with Hamilton, who was passionate to share his story. He had felt that he had this alternative narrative, and I think him and some of his community had felt in a way that there had been, only a number of voices that had kind of shared this story of kids being this kind of amazing journey, etc. And he was just so passionate, and I found him really incredibly engaging, that I just wanted to get involved and help empower him however I could to tell his story about him and his friends, and it really just started from there.
And when you started, did you know kind of the story that you would be sharing, or was it just kind of a catalyst for kind of greater discovery? Like, what was the kind of filmmaking process like? I mean, in the sense that, did you know what story you wanted to tell, or was it kind of a sense of discovery?
Well, going in, I mean, in growing up in the 90s, I was involved in the skateboard subculture. So I knew some of the players. Obviously knew, the film itself. The film personally didn't impact me, and I put it on such an iconic pedestal as a lot of other people, but I did understand the cultural significance of kids. So, and having known the backstories of the Justin Pierces and the Harold Hunters, etc., I felt I knew a bit, but it was really just sitting down with Ham and fleshing out his story and getting to know the kind of players and his background first. I mean, I was aware, kind of growing up in that subculture, that it's what I like to call a very video-centric subculture. Like, there was always people hanging around with video cameras. So I knew that there was a wealth of archival to tap into, which was also another really kind of, promising element if you want to tackle a film, like this, where you're talking like 2.5 decades ago, essentially. So having imagery to back up the story is obviously a wonderful thing. So it was just that, just starting as a development process of just beginning to learn the story and getting my head around what kind of material was surrounding to help support telling of it. Yes.
Well, it's interesting. You mentioned kind of being kind of part of the skating community back in the '90s and things. How has that kind of shaped the sorts of films that you make, or even kind of the visual aesthetic that you or subjects that you choose?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. I mean, growing up with skateboarding and being, kind of growing up on all those skate videos, it's very kind of raw. I do find myself drawn to characters that you could call fringe dwellers, or not your kind of mainstream type characters. Yeah, but it was a very kind of DIY culture and a very creative culture. So, I think that, helps the way to, attack things. And I kind of feel like documentary is a really good medium for that. We're not always, slave to the big budgets, etc. There's nothing really stopping you. All you need to tap into is a camera and, have lots of passion and heart, and you can go for it, which I think is a really great thing.
Most definitely. And I guess, in thinking about that, and particularly with the subject here of We Were Once Kids, do you think that the folks in the film kind of shared their stories now partly just through getting to this point in time in adulthood and reflection that happens when you're around their age now? Or do you think like technology kind of also provided the tools, in the sense that like that documentaries are more common, the tools to build, telling a great story is no easy task, but do you think like, was it just that they reached their point in time in life where it was like time to kind of empower themselves, or do you think the tools kind of helped empower them?
I think it's all of the above, really. I think too, becoming adults, and I think that's part of the journey of this. It's like the characters in this film really came from really heavily dysfunctional backgrounds. So for them to kind of grow into adulthood and survive and kind of break these cycles of poverty, addiction, whatever that they came out of, it's a really kind of empowering thing, and a really, great story. And, for me, this is really a human story. And I think now that they've gone through that and they're old enough to look back and go, oh, wow, actually some of that stuff was really questionable that went on, and maybe they didn't have the skills, or there was definitely no people guiding them, or mentorship or parental guidance, etc., to kind of come through that. So they were kind of, in a way, it's a tricky one, because the themes here, you do have kind of opportunity versus exploitation, and how does that all play out? And I think that's, one of the things that we tap into in this film and this story.
Most definitely. I mean, one of the things I thought was also interesting that I didn't expect, I mean, I guess looking back on it, I shouldn't be surprised, but also just how New York City of that time period is as much a character as, the kind of individuals, in the sense that, the situation with which New York City found itself in the '70s and '80s kind of, created the possibility for this scene, and also some of the kind of traumas that the kids were dealing with. Did you know that you wanted to kind of showcase New York in that same sort of way, or was that just something that evolved during the editing process?
Right. No, I think from the beginning, yes, it was always definitely going to be part of it. I mean, I, from an outsider looking in, we all knew that it was a brutal landscape, but I don't think I quite fully grasped how brutal the city was back in the '70s and '80s, and especially for young kids coming up in that environment, is really extreme. So, I hope that, we're also able to kind of shed a light on that, and it, just gives a bit more context for all of us in the rest of the world that weren't there. And, because New York at times is so romanticized, that I don't think that the kind of brutal realities of what was going on, especially back then, is that well known.
Yeah, well, especially, I mean, when you wind up in New York City nowadays, it's like
Yeah.
it's as if it's fantasy land. So
Mm.
I think people, there's this kind of discussion in documentary filmmaking about like kind of authorship and whose voices get to be told and things.
Mhm.
And obviously you had like how much of this film did you kind of see as a collaboration versus um you as a filmmaker kind of telling a story, and at what point in time did you share the film with the subjects, and what have their responses been?
Well, I mean, that was really important to us as filmmakers to make sure that, it was collaborative. We didn't just go off, take the story, go away, and go, here you go. So, yeah, we were constantly showing cuts and talking through. I mean, we want Hamilton. I mean, this is Hamilton's story, So, we did obviously. He does have a both a writer and a producer credit in this film, which he probably wasn't doing those roles in a traditional sense, but just as part of ownership that, this is his story and his film. And we definitely don't want to be being those kind of filmmakers. So it was absolutely a collaborative process all the way through, as as we wanted to do, without, but still being truthful to the story as well.
Yeah. Well, I know one of the questions that folks are going to ask, and in some ways I feel like the film is actually stronger for this, but did like were you guys hoping that somebody like Larry Clark would participate, or Harmony Korine to provide their side of the story? And
Mm.
like how was that process? And in some ways, was that something that you're hoping for, or just in the sense of, you know, did you reach out to them and just at least as an attempt, but in the sense of it wasn't so important in shaping the story you wanted to tell?
Yes, exactly. So we didn't feel we were dependent on them, but we would have loved to have heard their side of the story. We did reach out on multiple occasions. I think, that was only the right thing to do. Unfortunately, they didn't want to participate for whatever reasons. So, yeah, so that would be it.
Well, sometimes I think silence speaks more volume than the words sometimes.
Yes, I agree. I agree.
Um, so, as we kind of walk away from the theater tonight and, from the film, like, what's the kind of thing that you would want folks to kind of be kind of ruminating about, or, talking about? What, like, is there kind of a larger kind of like takeaway?
Yeah, I do. I think this is a cautionary tale. We do, the price of or the cost of artistic pursuits, and but I think mainly for me that it's a really positive takeaway for me in that despite all the obstacles, the survivors have managed to come through and really be functioning members of society and parents themselves, and have evolved and broken the shackles of extreme poverty, addiction, domestic violence, whatever that may be, to come through with that, and move forward. Power to you.
No, I think I think that can't be said more, that there's not a lack of wanting to be able to kind of encourage that, because I mean I think it's a testament that they're all here to most of them to tell their story, and live their life. And I mean we're talking 25 years on, and usually too often folks that suffer this sort of trauma don't survive to kind of see it out on the other side. But in outside of being just kind of a very thought-provoking film, I just thought it was artfully created, and just a really interesting film. So thanks again for making it, Eddie.
No, thank you, Chris. And again, just honored to be shown at the festival.
Most definitely. And I should also just kind of the spiel I always try to give our audience is that, as a film festival, we're lucky enough that filmmakers and distributors share their films early on with us, for you as an audience to kind of discover the kind of documentary and film art that's out there. But we're also their kind of street team. So in the sense of as their film gets out there for out in the world, our job is to kind of help spread the gospel. So Eddie, what's the best way to kind of, either kind of follow you to kind of get a sense of other projects that you might work on, or also just kind of follow the path with the film?
Well, I mean, I believe the film is getting released in North America mid-year, around there. So yeah, just, I mean, look out for it on the internet, and any kind words or support, share the love on social media, be greatly appreciated.
Very cool. Well, thanks again, Eddie, and have a great day.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it.
Most definitely.